radical sign.
Yeah.
And today we're looking at how to simplify them. All right, Schubert, I'm going to have to do this because I must have missed a few times. It's a pretty simple process. You already know how to do this. You know, the square root of 25, simplified would be what?
5.
5, because 5 times 5 is 25. But what if you have something that looks like this, the square root of 72? Okay, there is no perfect square of that. It doesn't work out to one exact number times another number, but there is a way to simplify it. And it's not a difficult thing to do, as are most things in math. It might be kind of confusing, but it's a couple different steps. The first thing you need to do is kind of like we've been doing a lot, is you need to prime factorize. Okay, what does the square root of 72 break down into? And please don't cut corners here, because this is where I see a lot of people get into trouble. When you break this down, okay, when you break this down, what times what gives you 72?
8 times 9.
But it needs to be the square root of 8 times the square root of 9. Don't just put 8 times 9, because it's not 8 times 9. It's the square root of 8 times the square root of 9. What times what gives you 8? Square root of 2 times the square root of 2
I remember doing this.
times the square root of 2. We might have done it last year.
I remember.
And the square root of 9 breaks down into the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. Okay, that is the whole thing prime factorized. Okay. The second thing is you need to look for pairs. I don't mean the fruit, I mean matches. And when you find a pair, okay, you can cross off a pair and get just one non-radical number.
I know, I don't like math either.
One non-rad number.
I drew a pair.
Oh, gotcha. Wednesday, you guys know when we're starting on the first one? No idea?
I don't know, it was
You
up,
can have fifth grade math.
it was up in the air last time I talked to Margaret. I would say yes, we'll have at least 5th grade math.
Okay, so from 10:30 till 11:20?
I'll talk to you. Can we talk lunch?
Yeah, we can. We
Let's
can
do
have
that. I don't know what Margaret came up with there. So,
I have a question for you. Barb has me working on. Is there a way to delete all of these last 25 anymore, or does it have to stay in
oh
there?
no, you have to go back to the, you have to go way back to the first, home screen and go over to that screen and uncheck it. That would be one from the secure place.
Okay.
What is that word saying before dots?
Get. In other words, this, children, here's how this works. If you have a pair, the square root of 2 times a square root of 2, if you get a pair, you cross off that pair and you get just one of the number that's under the radical sign, which only makes sense because what is the square root of 2 times the square root of 2? The square root of 4. What is the square root of 4? 2. Okay? Same thing here. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is the square root of 9. Square root of 9 is a perfect square, which is just 3. 2 identical ones cross off to give you just a normal one. This other square root of 2 does not have a pair or a match or a friend there, so it has to stay. You remultiply the normal numbers to get 6. You keep the square root of 2, and that's the simplified form of 72. And the nice thing about that is, because if you're looking for what it really means, the square root of 2 is like 1 point whatever. You know, 6 times the square root of 2, you could approximate what that actual number would be in real world. It's probably somewhere between 6 and 7. Okay, so you get a real idea. Whereas just looking at the square root of 72, if I gave you the square root of $72, you probably would have no idea what that is. Whereas here, 6 times the square root of 2, you know it's well somewhere around $6 or $7. So you can get like a real feel for what the actual number is as opposed to what that is there. Kylie, how?
You know that the square root of 9.
Yes, please don't go there. If you get that, go ahead. Don't mess everybody else up with that. Yes. I'll say yes to that, yes, Kylie. You don't have to do this is going down to its simplest form there. Step number 3 here, let me write this down step before I do that before I forget. And then you remultiply what you have left. Remultiply what's left. And that's where you had a 2 times 3, which got you 6, and then the square root of 2. You can't multiply these together. 6 times the square root of 2 is not the square root of 12. Okay, you have to look at square roots as being like x's or whatever. You can't multiply them, they have to stay next to each other. Step.
But like the square root of 72, if you know the square root of
Yes,
like
yes.
64 and then 81,
Yes.
shouldn't it be between 8 and 9?
What's that?
Like it says 6 and 7, but like
Oh, maybe the square root of 2 is, what is the square root of 2? Let's look. It could be 8, it's probably 8 something. What is the square root of 2?
I don't know. More
Square root of 2, people. Here, let's look. Let's go to my handy dandy calculator.
Calculator?
Wait, that's not it, is it? I don't want this, do I?
It can be that many.
Where's the tools there? Calculator. Let's look at the square root of 2. 2 square root of, okay, it's 1.4. So if I took 1.4 and multiplied it by 6, stuff I'm gonna get, it's actually 8.4. Or closer to that. I was a little off on my calculation. Good thought there. Way to think. Yeah, because the square root of 64 you know is 8. Steph was saying, you know the square root of 64 is 8, and you know that the square root of 81 is 9. And square root of 72 falls between those, so you know it has to fall between 8 and 9. So she was saying my 6 and 7 was a bad estimate there. Does that help?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, what happens, who was saying that? You were saying that too? What's that?
So that's
The answer is 6 times the square root of 2. That is in its simplified form, right here. That's as much as you can really do. Now, what about, you're going to say, when there's letters there? Somebody say that.
No, we're doing various letters.
Yes, what about when there's letters there? What if I have 180, the square root of 180 k to the 3rd power? Well, you still have to do the same thing we just talked about. You have to prime factorize 180, and you have to prime factorize k cubed. What does 180 break down into? Let's do 2 times 90. What's 90 break down to? 2 times 45. What's 45 break down into? Square root of 9 times the square root of 5. And what's the square root of 9 break down? Square root of 3 times the square root of 3. And I would strongly recommend taking your time and writing them down in order that you have here. We've got the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. That's these two. You've got 2 square roots of 3. Square root of 3 times square root of 3. You've got the square root of 5. And what about the k's? If you prime factorize k cubed, you end up with the square root of k times the square root of k times the square root of k. What matches do we find? Here's a match, or a pair. There's a pair. This gives you just a normal 2. This gives you a normal 3. This gives you a normal k. These two don't have pairs, so you keep them. You remultiply 2 times 3 times k is 6k, and then under the radical sign you have 5k. Because you can multiply things that have radical signs together with the normal numbers. So that's simplified down to 6k times the square root of 5k. Doesn't that sound relatively exciting? Now, let's do something like this. What about the square root of something big like 10,000?
the variables.
No variables on this one. What times what gives you 10,000?
2 times 4.
Think about this. This is the same thing as the square root of 100 times the square root of 100. Remember when you multiply numbers that have zeros at the end, ones with zeros at the end, you just put the zeros at the end. Now, for those of you that are kind of catching on to this whole sort of thing, if you see the square root of 100 times the square root of 100, okay, as long as it's a duplicate, you don't have to prime factorize this all the way down to the square root of 2 times 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 the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 times the square root of 5. Because once you come up with a double, you can automatically stop at this point and go, oh, 2 square roots of 100 will give me just a 100. They're already doubles. Okay? Otherwise, you could break this down. I can tell you the square root of 100 is square root of 2 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 5 times the square root of 5. That's a square root of 100. You have another one over here, square root of 2, square root of 2, square root of 5, square root of 5. I can guarantee you when you break all those down, you will end up with, I would very much love a donut.
Yeah.
Is it your birthday?
Because all I need is my half birthday.
Oh. Okay, you just have the donut?
Okay, I don't know. Sure.
Somebody want the donut? Just 2 of you? Perfect, this is a quick game. Pick a number between 1 and 50.
30.
Too low.
Oh,
25?
What's that?
25?
Still too low.
so I win?
Between 1 and 50.
45.
Too high.
43.
Too high.
40.
Too high.
37.
Too high.
34.
Too low.
36.
Too high.
35.
I did the best. Shut up. So you wanna see it? That's it, 35. Okay, let's throw another one up here. Or let me give you one to try. 162 R4S8. 162 R4S, sorry. S to the 8th power. I'll get it right eventually. Go ahead, go at that. Break that down, tell me what that is in simplified form. 162 R to the 4th, S to the 8th. Alright. If you went and broke it down to its bare minimums, which you don't have to, if you understand that you can kind of take a shortcut above there, but some of you, it's up to you. You should have got 2 times square root of 3 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 times 4 square roots of r times 8 square roots of s's. Looking for their pairs, then you would end up with 2 square roots of 3 give you a normal 3, another 2 square roots of 3 give you another normal 3. This one doesn't have a match, so it's going to stay 2 square roots of r give you a normal r, another normal r, so you get r squared. So now I've got 9 for my number. I've got r squared, s times s times s times s, s to the 4th, and then left over that didn't convert to anything other is the square root of 2. Okay. Once again, shorten this up. If you recognize that the square root of 81 is a perfect square, you could have just stopped right there and said, okay, that gives me 9 times the square root of 2, which is what I get. You know, and then you just look for pairs of these. How many pairs of 2 do I get of the r's? 2 pairs of 2 and 4 pairs of 2 of the s's. Questions, comments, remarks, happiness, sadness, joyful, jubilation. Oh,
You're not filming.